Actually, I'm going to do things a little differently than Bima because I'm not Bima. He's perfect moderator, brilliant podcaster, storyteller, everything. Shout out to Bima. But they just got right into it, and I want to give everybody a chance here to say who you are and what you do, just so you all have a little bit of context. So maybe we'll just go down the line. Start with Yogi.
Yeah.
I don't know which. There's so many mics. I don't know which one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Yogi. I work here, Kamp Grizzly. Thank you all for coming out. I'm the ECD. I had a bunch of jokes with Bima, but I'm with the amazing Nishat. So we'll pass it to Marcus.
Yeah, I think so. My name's Marcus. I own Portland Gear. I'm an apparel background here in town. Started it 10.5 years ago now. Also started the Portland Instagram page, just at Portland, 14 years ago now. So love the city, even through the ups and the downs. We all feel it. We all know it. But we're downtown. Been lucky to have Jazzy helping us out for the last year or so. So we've got about 15 full-time people downtown in our office and about 30 total, 3 stores, one in the West End, one at Washington Square, and then one in the new airport. So.
Hi, I'm Jazmine. I'm a fashion content creator, and I work for this guy. So it's been fun.
Awesome. And we're here, and we're really going to talk about Portland, and we're all here in Portland. So I do have a question for the audience just to start, where we're going to do like a little raise of hands, which is, how many of you have lived here for 5 years or less? Can you raise your hand? Okay. How many of you lived here for 5 years or more? That's the rest of you. How many of you are born and raised here? Luke Yablonsky. Oh, wow, a bunch of you, not just Luke. Okay, cool. I think it's really important for us to just embrace, like, we're all here in Portland, and that's the thing that we have in common, regardless of what we do, and we're all part of this creative community. So I'm really curious to the group, really open to anybody. Just how did you land in Portland? Maybe you've been here forever. Maybe you came here, but just like, how has the city played a role in the work that you do?
I guess I'll start. I didn't have a choice. My parents moved here when I was in 5th grade, like most people from Southern California. I grew up in Wilsonville. I went to U of O till I ran out of money from partying, dropped out, worked in some restaurants. Luckily, I met Dan Portrait at a party one night, and he's like, yo, I design. I'm like, yo, I do websites. He's like, my brother's in a band. He needs a website. I'm like, let's link tomorrow when we're sober. And was it like 30 years later? Now I'm not that old, but 20 years later, we're still making things together. And yeah, the natural progression of leaving Eugene when it's 5 years and you need to leave because either you're going to be a crusty hippie or you got to move up. Sorry if you're from Eugene.
Congrats.
So I made it here, and now I'm a crusty Portlander.
Yeah. Cool.
I was born at St. Vincent Hospital. Anyone else here up on the hill? Nice. There you go. Born and raised here. Went to Century High School in Hillsborough, and then went to University of Oregon. My parents went to U of O. My sister went to U of O, so I had one choice, was to go to U of O. Got fired from my first screen printing job outside of college because I was being disruptive to them. It was a bunch of older people who'd had the same job, and I was trying to make screen printing interesting and cool and bring in athletes and try to tell stories around boring screen printed stuff. So they let me go after 5 months, and I remember crying driving back here, calling my sister saying, don't tell mom and dad I got fired. I'll figure out the story. Can I stay with you? She said yes. And just that 2-hour drive back to Portland, I said, I'll never work for anyone else again. I don't want someone else to control my ideas or put my ideas in a box. And woke up the next day and just started screen printing and finding places and flipping jobs and got the Portland Instagram page and started building authentic community back and hosting events and meetups, and then came up with the P logo and started selling shirts, and here we are.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I moved to Oregon 15 years ago when I was in 8th grade from Georgia. So then I went to U of O, only applied there, had everything I needed. Went back to Westland. Then COVID hit about like 2 years after I graduated. Started to experiment with fashion in college and in high school. No one was asking me to borrow clothes. No one looked my way. So I feel like people back then see me now. They're like, wait, Jazzy does fashion now? So I was able to experiment during that time. No one was outside, so I was able to make videos and really experiment and not be shy and go out. Then, COVID kind of left, and I had to really embrace my new style and come out. And I thought no better place to do that than moving into the city. Moved into the city, no car, so I'm always walking, big walker. And I'm kind of fast forward through a lot of it, but I was walking through the city as I do, and Portland Gear moved into a building right next to me, a block away, and I'd always pass it, and Marcus is always like, come in, and like, let's show you around. I'm like, okay. I'd just go back to my apartment. That I couldn't escape him. Like, I kept passing, and then finally he DM'd me on Portland Gear. He's like, hey, can we talk? And I was like, yeah, sure, like, I guess. And I
You sound creepy. We knew each other.
Sorry.
We did a project before. You designed a really cool wine bottle for us. And don't make me roast you for wearing 2 ties.
Whoa.
I said no one borrows my clothes. Yeah, I told you I skip through a lot. I don't want to, bedtimes. But yeah, so we did have I knew him before, but didn't really know much about Portland Gear besides that. And then I came to the office. It was cool. Had no idea what he wanted to talk about, but then left with a job. I was like, okay, I always told myself I did a in-person office job, and then I did the remote thing, and I told myself I never want to commute to work driving, and I never want to be remote. And then lo and behold,
You live 1 block.
1 block away. So the universe was like, right here. So I couldn't really deny it. So yeah.
Portland's great for that. I want to maybe just ask you a question that is a little bit separate from the P logo and just a little bit about you and content creation, if that's cool. Like, you got the 2 ties on, you got your own style, you're super tapped into the Portland creative scene and also your own sense of style, and have built a whole platform, a massive platform. Check her out, like and subscribe. But how does, you look at Portland and everyone here is a part of like a really fashionable creative scene, but it seems like you're building a perspective. How do you do that in relationship to the city? How does the city inspire you, if it does, to create a stylish and point of view around fashion?
Yeah, so like I said, I got into fashion during COVID. I was thrifting a ton, and as we all know, Portland has a ton of great thrift shops. I live like literally blocks from my 2 favorite ones. So I was able to really experiment a lot for cheap, because if I didn't like it, it was only like a $5 shirt. And, even being in this room of people, just being in the city, it's so easy to get inspired by people. And, even my boss, like, sometimes he inspires me with his simple looks, but I'm like, you know what? Like, there's always something there. But also, like, we have Nike, we have Adidas, we have Wyden. Like, there's so many cool people here. I actually just met someone who moved from New York. It was like, I moved to Portland because of the fashion creativity. I was like, wait, what? Mm-hmm. But it's true. Like, I think when we're in it, it's hard to, like, see it as first. But then you do meet other people, and now I feel like every time I step out my apartment, I have to put a fit on. Like, you never know who you're going to run into.
Yeah, cool.
I want to shout out Jazzy. She is bold in taking risks, and not a lot of content creators do. They see what other people do and they just do it. But she challenges herself. I see it in her own stuff. I see it in what she brings here. She's always trying to push herself and doesn't need to be inspired or pushed by anyone else. And I think that's a very rare thing to find. That's why I adore and value her so much, is because she's just trying to be better than yesterday. And I think that's a great trait to have for creative people. And so I appreciate how she does that without needing anyone else to notice. But then she's amassed a nice following.
Okay, love the Love Fest and shout out. Let's talk about love, and let's talk about love for Portland. You started a brand that is literally making Portland an icon, a brand that is literally built about wearing the city on your sleeve, on your hat, whatever. What made you decide that Portland is, iconic, or could be iconic enough that is like worthy of a brand for people to embody?
Yeah, I think when I did the P logo in 2014 or so, I think there was a lot of things colliding. We don't have a baseball team yet. So there's, oftentimes the logo, Detroit, Yankees, Seattle, I can see it, it's generally an MLB logo kind of becomes the icon of a city, and people wear that hat to represent it. So 1, we didn't have that. 2, I just always loved. I could try this.
Mocha's run?
Check. I always just loved wearing the things I believed in. So I grew up a Nike kid in University of Oregon. So the O to me was always a representation of my family, and Nike was always the aspiration of sport. And so I always loved wearing the things that I loved. And so for me, coming up with the P logo was because I genuinely just wanted to wear my pride for Portland. And I didn't go to Portland State, didn't go to UP, loved the Blazers, but it's an abstract logo. So I wanted to just wear something that I found interesting. So it came up with the P with the state of Oregon on the inside. Knew I wanted to keep it simple, as most of the great logos are. And again, I had no business plan, no goal, no money, nothing. I just wanted to make stuff that I wanted to wear. And I think it resonated with people from the very first day. And then it's just kind of been a continuous evolution of how to do that in a different way, evolve the brand, evolve as the city changes, as new people come. How do we represent it through years of challenges and stuff? How do we kind of maintain a constant for the people that do care and still love it here? I like to think of Portland as just like a sibling. It's like you love them, but they can drive you nuts. And it's like you can't get away from them, and you maybe want to leave, but you can't because it's family. And it's just like we all know that feeling. We all know the issues that the city has, and it can get so easy to want to turn. And I'll find myself some days being like, the last thing I want to do is go downtown. And then there's some days where I'm like, we got to go save the city. And I think we all feel that in different ways. It's, if your window got smashed one night, you're really upset, and you come to an event like this and you're like, man, Portland's amazing. Like there's incredible people here still doing stuff. So for me, I always just try to stay constant and appeal to the people that do still care and that want to be present and give to the city. And the naysayers that I probably see more than anyone else because of the social pages, I just kind of let them fly.
Yeah. Two things I just want to follow up with you, and we'll get to you, don't worry. If people know me, there's no way I'm not going to say I'm from Philly originally. And when I first moved here, people were always wearing like the Phillies hat, the P for the Philly. And then your brand really took over, which is incredible to like have bared witness to. But it's not just in Portland. I think that Portland has gotten a lot of global attention, national attention, global attention. And so what is that relationship like for you when you've created this brand that is about this place, but is celebrated outside?
Yeah, it's cool. I think we're kind of on evolution 2.0 of the brand. So the first 8 years was a lot of Portland to Portland, P-shirts, P-hats and stuff. And then 2 years ago, we really found this unique insight in our backpacks, our water-resistant travel bags. And to me, that's more of taking the insights of Portland and Northwest and applying them to product. So this year we'll sell a couple 100,000 backpacks to all over the world outside of Portland. So we found a product market fit now that we can put paid behind and partnerships and stuff. And it's now about exporting Portland to the rest of the world and getting them, not having to say Portland loudly, but getting the little P logo and getting the insights of the water resistance and the proximity to nature. And so our brand has taken a 180. We still get to do that stuff for kind of the legacy and how we got here. But now it's like, how do we take the things that uniquely make Portland unique to the world and actually create intentional products and then share those on a much bigger scale? So that's been really fun to do. And 10 years from now, we'll probably be doing something else.
Yeah, it's so dope. Thank you for making the city known so big. Yogi, we're sitting in I want to say the house that Yogi built, but it's also Dan and, rest in peace to Kobe, of course, in the reference. But you've been building this thing together with the folks at Kamp for so long. What does it mean to build something for Portland? It's a similar question for Portland that also is like an epicenter that reaches so many, like represents global brands, athletes all over the world. How do you sort of maintain that local cultural center while talking to athletes literally all over the planet?
I mean, I think there's a lot of pressure of like, as being a creative in Portland with the legacy that exists here, right? Like you have Nike, you have Wyden and Kennedy, like just do it. One of the greatest, sorry, all the Adidas people, Micaiah, one of the greatest taglines ever written, so to like follow in the footsteps of being a creative in this city with so many great creatives coming out of this city. I think, there's a lot of pressure to do great work because there is a lot of great work. There's a lot of great agencies. There's a lot of great people doing a lot of great things like Portland Gear, and I just think we just always just try to make Portland proud and then also just like, how are we tapping into the next generation of creatives in Portland? And, that's my job now isn't so much of like landing the big idea. It's like, how am I helping the next generation land their big idea, and like really foster that community within Kamp that hopefully resonates outside of Kamp, and inspires you all, and I think creativity can be competitive. I've never met a photographer that likes another photographer to some extent. But it's like, I love, and I draft off of like when I see like instrument doing something or industry doing something or Wyden doing something, I'm like, damn, that's good. How do I go do something like that? And I think there is a fair amount of like competitiveness in this city, but in a really cool way. Cause I think we all know there's enough brands, there's enough work, hopefully for all of us to survive, you know? And I think that's what's really cool about this city is because like we all can be competitive, but then also like pat each other on the back. I don't think it's like cutthroat like New York or LA. It's just like, damn, Nishat's crushing it. How do I go get that next brief? How do I win that RFP? How do I do that so that I can like level up for camp? You know, and I think that's that kind of thing, you know, that we always strive is like looking at work out there, looking at the work that everyone else does in this city and like try to inspire us. And we hope that we're inspiring other people in the city to do really cool stuff.
Yeah. I don't think there's I don't know of another city that there is where people who work at different agencies would come together and have a conversation like this. We kind of have this collective ego of Portland that we're building, which is something to really be proud of. And you were talking about mentorship and the next generation. And how do you foster that for different kinds of communities? You know, in the previous panel, it was so cool to hear, you know, August, a first generation college student, not from Portland, James talking about that child of immigrants. Like, how do you bring in or pipeline those like next generation of authentic, new, creative minds?
I mean,
here?
Shout out Kate, like PSU, like probably a lot of you went to PSU, designers at PSU. Like, you know, like I think there is like June 5th, there's Fresh or one of the portfolio reviews.
soon.
I think it's very soon. I don't know. She'll get us all with emails soon to come see everything. But I mean, I think for us, it's like, there are, I think, at least 2 people I can see right in the back there that were interns, Portland State interns. Now they're designers, and now they're making some of the best work, you know, design work at camp. We've got a lot of people that, you know, we really care about the younger generation. Like, I got a gray beard now. Like, this is every strand of gray is a project, you know, and, you know, it's just like, I can't do it on my own. Dan can't do it on his own. Our creative directors can't do it on their own. You know, like I need to know what the latest TikTok trend is. So I tap someone in the office and be like, yo, like I'm an old, like help me, you know? And sometimes I surprise them and be like, yo, like today I surprised a client. I knew what clipping was. You know, anyone else know what clipping is? You know? Okay. You need to have like a, Luke does. I taught him. Okay. It's basically, we got a Little League World Series thing. It's little girls. They like do positive affirmations and they do little clips. And so the client was like, damn, you know what clipping is? I'm like, yeah, it's got to do the research. But, you know, for me, it's just like, how are we tapping in and really like getting the best? Like, you know, like I said, I'm an ECD. Now my job is to work to get the best ideas out of people. It's not necessarily, yes, I do have to come up with the idea every now and again, or I'm the lead creative on a job. But for me, it's like, how do I get the best out of Luke? How do I get the best out of Mauricio? How do I get the best out of Brandy? How do I get the best out of everyone on our team? How do I get the best out of Dan sometimes? You know, like those 8 a.m. meetings, like he's like, yo, I need to talk. You know, like how can I push our photographer, Kyle? You know, I think that's the big thing is, you know, and I think the thing that people don't realize, they want our jobs and they don't realize how hard our jobs are because it's about feedbacking and it's about that hard conversation that you need to be like, hey, if you want to grow, you need to do X, Y, and Z. They're like, well, I think I am. I'm like, I don't think you are. But I think there's, you know, I think that's the whole thing for me now in my career as I get older is like, how can I make other people shine? Like, how can I help them grow? How can I help them get their gold pencil, their lion, their whatever, if that's what they strive to do? Or how do I get them to be a designer to, you know, an art director? How do I get an art director to be an ACD? How do I get the ACD to CD? You know, and then hopefully they don't take my job. Yeah. But, you know, so I think, you know, mentorship's really, really important. And, you know, for me, you know, I'm part of like Event Marketers BIPOC mentorship program. We're working with HBCUs. We're constantly like tapping in with Kate and PSU. So like, how can we like even grow our reach post COVID of like finding people that don't actually live in Portland that we can work remotely or work with our New York office, you know? So I think it's just like the world is so much bigger now. I think for all of us leaders to like tap into a more diverse, bigger group of people, as much as we love Portland and want to see Portland shine, I think that also helps Portland by bringing Portland to those people, whether it's through remote work.
Definitely.
One of my mentors said something interesting last week. You know, the idea of 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. And he said, if you just go and try to do something for 10,000 hours, you will not get any better at it. you have to have people help you and advising you and shaping you during those 10,000 hours to actually become an expert at something. I thought that was really interesting. It's like, you can just, he's writing. I'm like, you could write for 10,000 hours, but if someone's not coaching you and telling you what you could do better and telling you what you did wrong and how to improve you, like, you will be the same writer you were when you started 10,000 hours ago. So it's just something that as we all grow in business and stuff is like, how do we be the ones that get those people further along in those 10,000 hours?
Yeah. I'm actually really curious. You are a hands-on maker. You are, doing the influencer thing, and you're working at a local organization, and you're just a walking work of art that you're assembling. Like you said, you got to put the fit together. You don't know what people are going to see, who you're going to run into. You're kind of in that beginning stage. And can you just share a little bit about that, as you're like so hands-on in the making, and how maybe that influence is reciprocal? Because we don't live in a world now where it's only the great ECDs that know everything. I think that Yogi and I certainly would admit to not knowing everything, and we can learn a lot from the people that are just coming in who are more native to these platforms.
Yeah, so Portland's a great place to be a creator. Obviously, I've thought about LA, New York, but I think this is where I need to be. I think I get inspired, and like they've mentioned before, it's less competition and just more collaboration. I feel empowered by my community, and everyone has their own unique style. So I think starting my journey with social media, it was something I never thought of. Like James said, my dad, he was a computer software engineer. I don't even know, that's terrible. But he wanted me to go his path. He wanted me to be in the ROTC. Hello. That was never going to happen. And it took them a while to like understand like the path I was going. But I think when you have a passion, and even if you find it later in life, like I said, fashion was never my thing. You just kind of have to lean into it. Like I said, being in Portland, it's a great place to have that be fostered. And there's so many like great agencies, great companies, great people, great stores. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question at this point. But yeah, I think just leaning into it. I think social media is definitely daunting. And pre-COVID, like I definitely would watch YouTubers or people kind of doing the content thing and like wanting to do it. And it wasn't until COVID that I had the space to do it. And then I did it. And I never knew where it was going to lead me. And I had no expectations, which again is like a great spot to be at. So every opportunity I've gotten from content has been just a beautiful surprise. And I'm so grateful. So I think the reward is doing something I never thought I was going to do or was even like an option or presented to me early on. So I think there's reward in just, taking that risk and leaning into it.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about having an audience that goes way beyond Portland, and just there's a perception and there's a reality, right? So like, what is the perception that you are hearing people say, about fashion, style, Portland, creative? And then what is your reality? Are those things really different? Are they close together?
Well, it's funny. A lot of people think I'm from the Bay, and I'm like, no, I'm from Portland. And they're like, oh, so Nike. And I'm like, yeah, but don't work for Nike. I think when they do connect the dots that I'm from Portland, I think it like opens up their eyes a little bit more. And they're like, oh, okay, like I never thought about, Portland being a place of fashion or being a place of creativity outside of like the sports world. So I like bridging that gap. I think there's a lot of I'm Filipino, and a lot of my audience is Filipino and Asian. And moving here, I moved from Atlanta, so it was a big culture shock. Just a lot of white people.
Oh yeah, I went through that too when I moved here from Philly.
So it was great to kind of be a representation from Portland, and I think that's why I've stuck here, because I'm able to get that reach and kind of make people think differently about this city. I've loved it since I've moved, and that's what's kept me here. That's why I'm not going to any other city. But yeah,
I think it's dope. I think it's dope what you've made and what you're giving to Portland. And I know we've just got like a couple minutes left. I do want to ask each of you, and we'll start at the end. You've kind of tipped us off with this one. But when you think about what you've built here, like what are you hopeful for that it gives to Portland, and that Portland can kind of give to it?
That's a really hard question. Damn. I think for me, it's like continuing that legacy of, the great creative that has come out of Portland, from all of the agencies, all of the people, from, content creators all the way to bands, to artists, to, just everyone in this room is just like, I hope that like Kamp, what Dan and myself, Justin, Jamie, or, Guy, Jade, our whole leadership team is really doing here, Peter, are like really just like creating inspiring work that like can be like, people are like, damn, that's from Portland. Like it's always one of those things, Nishat, you worked at WK, is like, you're always like, damn, that's from, why are they in Portland? And I love when I'm, people are like, when I'm in New York, they, where you live in New York? I'm like, I don't live in New York. I live in Portland. Or I'm in LA. They're like, so where you live in LA? I'm like, I'm from Portland. I'm like, they're like, Camp's doing this out of Portland. I'm like, yeah, we have a small New York office, but yeah, like we do this out of Portland, and I think that's what's really cool is to, still put Portland a little bit on the map from a creative lens of things. I think especially post-pandemic, as things got really expensive here, I think Portland used to be a haven because you could get an apartment for $300 and just, I'm going to be in a band, and I don't, now rent is $3,000 and you can live in SF for the same price, and I think it's different. So I think, us all banding together, everyone in this room, to really just like show the world it's bigger than Portlandia. It's bigger than a lot of the things, which was great. It was great. I was on. A little
Episode 3, season 2.
No, it was like a
straight
to Comcast, like weird thing. But yeah, but I think, people see on the news like our houseless problems. They see Antifa, you know what I mean? But like, I think we can change the narrative of like what is really great about Portland by doing great work. And, whether it's awards, whether it's just seeing stuff in the press and just people tracking back to our agencies, your brand, any of that stuff. It's like, it's bigger here. And we have a really cool thing. Everyone has a really cool thing going on in this city than what Fox News is twisting the narrative of Portland to be out there during this time.
Yeah.
For me, it's just all about connection, having the Portland Instagram and building and having people all over the world see it, and having our brand have physical products that people can touch and see. And when my favorite stories are when someone's at an airport and they saw someone with the P hat and they're in, it's like, I love that our brand, a logo, a city can create a human connection with people. And so I think that's what keeps me motivated, and why I'm open to, as products evolve and as stories evolve, it's, to me, it always comes back to like the people. Like, can people come closer together through the things that we make, through the stories we tell, through the things that we post, through the people we work with. And if that happens, then I feel good.
Cool.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, well, you really answered the question in our last thing, so I'm just gonna do one last thing before we get out of here, which is like looking at this audience and this group of people. I hope you all get to like mingle and meet each other. But like, what is the piece of advice you would give to the creatives that are here tonight that are literally trying to build community by showing up in a place, not just on a Zoom, not streaming? It's a you had to be here moment. So what is the advice you would give to the Portland community today?
Well, this is a great start, just being here. I've lived here for 4 years, and I just recently started doing stuff like this. I think I use the internet as a way to connect, but there's something about in person, that really drives it home. And I think that's also why I decided to take a position at Portland Gear, because I really love that community, and I've met so many great people through that. So just showing up, and in terms of like, I guess what I do, just do it. I think one of my favorite things, or sayings, I'm not going to get it right, but do it and then perfect it later. But just do it. Well, shout out Nike.
Perfect line. Wow. Did you write that?
Tagline. You should. One of my favorite lines from the great Jim Etzel at Sport Oregon. He just says, "You must be present to win." And I just think that's great. Just showing up is half the things. I can't tell you how many people I've met just from showing up to things. People tonight that I'll meet, I didn't know you before this, and now I know you. It's just like, so being present, putting yourself in positions to meet people, to do things, I think is important. So yeah, my advice to young creatives, to old creatives, to anyone is you must be present to win.
I think you already touched on this. You never know everything,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I think as a creative, like, you can always learn something. You know, for me, it's like, you know, Guy always jokes, I want to be a producer, but it's like, I care about what's going on in production to educate myself. You know, I care about everything around the agency, everything around what we're doing. And I stole this from, you know, there's a lot of sneaker nerds in here, from Salehi, his brand Sponge. And everyone's like, why'd you call your brand Sponge? He's like, be a sponge, absorb everything, you know? And that's something that I always, like, when the kids come in and talk, I'm like, it's not mine, it's his. I always give him credit, but be a sponge. Like, you can learn from and be inspired from anyone, everything. And I think that's in always constantly be learning, you know, like, we were talking about AI, you know, and that's a whole other panel, but it's just like, you know, people were scared of social media 10 years ago, you know, now we have Jazmine. Yeah, exactly. Like, creating amazing content, working for, you know, brands, you know, and doing rad work for brands. But for me, it's like, don't be scared, like, learn it. Like, how do we embrace it? How do we, you know, and I think that's the thing is, like, you know, you could always learn something from someone, you know, no matter if you're an ECD, CCO, you can learn something from your junior designer. They might have the best idea. So always have an open mind, always walk in with open ears, and always be listening and always be learning.
Amen. Amen. I learned a lot from each of you, and I got to know you tonight. It's good. It's been 10 years since we've seen each other.
So just so everyone knows, when Nishat and I first met, she was a designer. I was a motion graphics person. You were CCO?
Yeah, CCO at Instrument.
ECD. Like, it's crazy to think, like, it's so weird. Like, we're like talking, we're like, you were a baby designer, and so I was just this little motion graphics dude who had no clue what we were doing, and then now we're making rad work with rad people. So
yeah, and Portland is also like, I think that, you know, I came from a big city, and I thought Portland is this really small place, and that's true and not true, because you can know somebody for so long and not see them for so long, and they're still making great stuff. So it's really important to try to connect, use the internet as a catalyst to connect with people in person, show up, be a sponge. Thank you for this wisdom from all of you tonight. It was so wonderful to hear from you, to meet you, and thanks y'all for listening.